So it looks as if readline and readlines gives us the data in lines. So that's a much better way of reading data for this particular task where we need to find individual students. So if we use readline, then we have to maybe loop through and add the data to possibly a list. And if we use readlines, then we can use a loop to go through every item in that list. So either of these two would work. So I'm going to just use readlines. So let's just change our program into best practice for working with files. So we're going to say with open. So if we just run this, make sure it works, and I can delete these comments. And so lines gives us the data as so it's a one string for each of the lines. So it's still not perfect. We still need to change it into a different format. So if I have a look at, let's say, lines 0, just to start with, that gives me the headings. And what is quite useful is to see what kinds of things I can do if I am given a string such as this. So again, I'm going to use my dir function and see what I can do with lines 0, which is a string essentially. So what I'm saying is, if I have a string, what kind of things can I do with a string? So we've got the usual. We're going to ignore the dunder methods above, the ones with double underscores, and we'll just kind of have a look at the kinds of things we can do. We can ask whether it's a decimal or a digit and things like that. We can also do things like split and strip. So split actually splits on a white line, and we've also got strip here, which takes away the new line character. So those are useful things to have, but I can't do that to the whole of lines because lines itself is a list. So if I asked what are the kinds of things I can do with lines, which is a list, then because that's a list, only list operations can be done, and so I have to pick out one line, a string, to be able to see what functions I could possibly use to get rid of the tab characters and the new line characters. And again, here I've used lines and read all of the lines in one go. You could quite easily have just read a line at a time and then process that to remove items from it, but it looks as if we can go through our list and then use strip to get rid of the new line, and then split, which will divide our string up. So just a reminder, this is our string, and that will divide our string up using the tab character, using any non-principal characters actually. So it will divide our line up using that. So those are the functions we're going to make use of here. So again, let's just experiment before we actually write our program. So if I just say one line, let's just pick out the second line or the third line and then just display that. So that's one student's details. So let's see what happens if we use strip. And what that should do is that should remove this new line character at the end of this string. So that's what it has done. So we no longer have the \n. And then I can also, let's just have a look at line. It still has new line, that was just showing me. So if I now do line dot strip, which I know takes off the new line, and in the same way I'm also going to use split and see whether that will split it on the tab. And what that gives me is it takes the string, which was this long string here. That's what's stored in line at the moment, because line is the third line of the file. It basically gives me each one of the elements which are separated by tabs as separate strings. Now that's really useful, because if I can have my data in this format, then it means I can then go through each one of these and find the student that I want. So this is essentially cleaning the data from a file so that we can process it. So I would solve this really step by step. I know I need a for loop to go through everything which is stored in lines. So first of all, I'll just make sure my for loop works. So I might say something like for line in lines. And then let's just start off with something very simple, and let's just print each of the lines out on a separate line. So again, this is just the name of a variable. This could just be L, so we can just decide what it needs to be, but this is going to hold each line as we go through the loop. So if I run this, then it will print out each of the lines like this, but we know that these are strings and they have got tabs separating them out, because how do we know that? Well, if I type in line over here, that still holds the last thing that it processed, the last thing that was stored in line, and that was the last student from our student grades file, and this is what it looks like. But when we send it to the print, because tabs are spaces essentially, it puts those spaces in instead of that character, and then it's new line, and that's why I've got a space here. So let's now see whether we can strip out the new lines and then also split so that we get a list. So let's have a variable pline, which is just processed line, and what we'll do is we'll take the line and we'll use strip to get rid of the new line, and then we'll use split to basically remove the tab character, and then what we'll do is we'll just print the processed line and see what that looks like. So again, we're just applying what we experimented with here, and so if I run this, so what happens now is it's printing out. Oh, that's great, isn't it? Because what it's done is it's separating out each one of these elements within the string for us, which is great because now we can go through the data. So if I have a look at what's in pline, that's the last person, but each element of the data is separated out, so we can get to each individual one. So I can go into pline and ask for let's say the student ID, which is going to be at 0 because it's the first element, and then I can pick out the student ID. So this is getting closer to us having the data in the format that we want. So we don't want to print it. What we want to do is just build up a list and then append this to that list. So let's go ahead and do that now. So what I've done here is I've created a list, because these are great for traversing, which is what we want to be able to do, and they're fundamental data structures in Python. So I've just called it sData, short for student data. I start off with an empty one, and then I'm going through each of the lines which I read in from the file. So they're in RAM. I've read the data in from the file, and then the file is closed because we're using the with as keywords, commands to deal with the file. And then I'm going through each of the lines and then getting rid of the new line character, splitting on the tab character, and then I'm adding that data to SData. So if I run this program and then I just ask to be shown what's in SData, I get all of my data broken up into individual elements which I can then access. So just to show you this again, so if I show you what's in SData, okay, so I get all of this, but if I ask for SData 0, so what's the 0th element, then I get the whole of the headings. And if I wanted to pick out the 3rd heading, I would have to use, because this is now a 2-dimensional list, which is basically, it's a list of a list. So you access it a bit like you access Excel cells. So you give a column heading and a row heading. So I'm picking out the very first row, which is 0. And if I wanted to pick out maths, that's the 3rd heading. So I use 2, and then that's how I get maths. So I am doing this because not only do you have to put the data into a format which you can process, but you also need to understand what the data is showing and how to access it, because that will then make it very straightforward to go through this data and find the student that we're looking for.